Hi everyone, welcome. What you see here is today's assortment of non-frozen foods that we're going to be giving to the red wigglers, because in this bin of red wigglers here, we've been feeding non-frozen foods for quite some time, almost from the very beginning. In the very beginning, we might have given them a couple frozen meals, but for the most part, it's been non-frozen stuff. We've got the peels of kiwi, we've got a number of Brussels sprouts, we've got jalapeno, as well as just a little sweet peppers core here. And I've got my little jackknife here with which we can even cut these Brussels sprouts in half to kind of expose more of the surface area to worm traffic, to help the worms gain access to the yummy meal that we're giving them. Before we dive in, let me just show you some info about the system in terms of its age, 233 days now. And like I said, 16 non-frozen feedings, 16 out of the 19 feedings. So feeding number 20 going in today is the 17th non-frozen feeding. And almost 2 weeks, 13 days have passed since we last checked in on these guys to give them their last feeding. That last feeding consisted of the peels of banana, and I don't remember, there might have been some coffee, but I think the main event on that last feeding was banana peels. After that much time, we might still see some leftovers, but probably not much. I mean, the stems of the banana will almost certainly still be there as leftovers, but I would think that the good portion of the peels would probably have been consumed. I don't know, you might have noticed that there was a couple coffee filters hiding in that little plastic transport container that I bought their food down here in. There's really nothing wrong with the feeding zone indicator that was on here. So we'll just keep using that one, and I'll just set the other ones aside for some future use. So the feeding zone indicator would show us where we last fed down the middle here. And over here it seems like this is one of those systems in which we've got springtails. All these little tiny white specks that you see are springtails. And they do like the moisture, so I think that the top surface is just getting a little bit too dry for them. And that's the reason we find them as we begin to peel back a little bit of the dry material, exposing more damp stuff right below it, and in it we find the springtails. And last time we went ahead and we just started blending in a lot of the leafy material that had been spread out across the system 2 feedings ago as sort of a top dressing. But we didn't leave any sort of a top dressing last time. Last time we simply came back in with the newspaper top coverings. We got a lot of nice material in here. This is also the system. I didn't make mention of it in the info board, but this is the system in which we've got a cork floating around somewhere. And I'm just wondering if this might be our lucky day where we finally encounter the cork. Perhaps we can just sort of go through the system semi-thoroughly to see if we might bump into it. We've talked about doing that on a number of occasions. And we have been pretty thorough. I think even the last check-in consisted of us being quite thorough in checking out the contents of the bin. But I think it was not like a targeted search for the cork. It was just a thorough tilling up and aeration of the system. And at that time we did not bump into the cork. And I have wondered if we were to actually do a deliberate targeted search for the cork, if we might actually encounter it. So I figured, what the heck, why don't we just give that a try. I think as a matter of course we'll simply find ourselves traversing the center of the bin, which is where we last fed, and we'll probably bump into a few leftover banana peels in the process. And well, we're probably more than a third of the way through the bin already, and I've so far not encountered anything that resembles the cork. Here it looks like we've got some old paper scraps that were probably used as supplemental bedding as part of the feeding. Oh, now I remember. You know what we did was we took a bunch of newspaper and we shredded it into strips. While most of my newspaper gets run through a shredder and turned into really small, tiny, thin strips, Last time we just figured we would do the old-fashioned approach to prepping some newspaper to be used as bedding, and we just tore it by hand. And that's what we're bumping into now, and there would have been a good bit of it put in here. And as you can see, the stuff has been sort of just sticking together, matted together into little piles, not getting the type of attention it deserves from the wormies. Perhaps this stuff too could just get sort of semi-recycled as supplemental bedding to go down into our feeding zone today. I mean, for that matter, I don't really have any bedding on standby here, but since we are bumping into a good bit of the bedding we applied last time, which is still almost in the original condition as it was when we first placed it in here, perhaps we can just use this as the foundation for today's feeding. And perhaps we could even apply it in such a way that maybe it gets blended in with some of the surrounding materials a little bit better to give more of it access to worm traffic versus just being piled up. So I guess I'm getting a little bit distracted here. Our search for the cork is not going to yield any sort of impressive results if we don't remain focused. I've already found a second one. Here's 2 stems of banana. I can't remember if the feeding consisted of 3 banana peels or 4, but I'm fairly certain I saw at least 3 when I skimmed through the video from last time. There could have been 4. And since we're not quite done checking with the stuff in the feeding zone, we might still encounter one more. I would almost ensure that we will, because we are being pretty thorough. Here's the 3rd one, and maybe there'll even be a 4th one. So I think we've probably gone through most of the stuff that's serving as something of a distraction here on our search for the cork. But so far I've not yet encountered it. I made a little joke in the comments with somebody who made reference to the cork being so elusive. I made a little joke about how it almost seems like it's been sort of transported out of our realm, as if there's like a little black hole or something somewhere in my wormery sucking up things. And this thing is a pretty good sized leftover of a stem of Brussels sprouts, so now we're actually putting in the Brussels sprouts that complement the old stem that's been in here for quite some time now. Alright, what else do we have going on here? Oh, guess what? Bingo! We finally found the cork. And man, I mean, we've kind of looked and looked and looked and not found it for some time now. And it almost feels to me like I might have accidentally chipped a piece of it off, which is something I've very intentionally avoided not doing. I mean, I know at one point we did intentionally chip off a piece of it, but for the most part we've been trying to just allow the worm bin processes to be that which causes the cork to eventually deteriorate to nothing. But I think if we keep it with our leftovers that we can put into the feeding zone when we replenish the food supply, then we can keep better track of it. And I think that now, since we're no longer on a scavenger hunt looking for the cork any longer, I think we can complete our examination of the entire system and give it a quick tilling up all the way out to the opposite edge of where we started. But we don't have to be as careful anymore since we've succeeded in finally locating that elusive cork. So that's pretty exciting. And the bin has also nicely benefited from getting a nice aeration throughout. I definitely like how the material in the system is nice and loose and crumbly almost everywhere. And at the same time, it just doesn't feel like it's drying out or becoming hostile to worm inhabitation. If that's the right word. So let's see what we could do about bringing in some of this lovely bedding. See if we can take another shot at putting it out there for the worms to make good use of. I'm even wondering if perhaps we could start layering in little bits of food on top of it, and then put in some more, because then it won't just end up sitting there as a big mound. So here we've got a little bit of kiwi peels and a couple Brussels sprouts that we've doubled the surface area of, or maybe not entirely doubled it, but definitely increased it. And a chunk of yummy jalapeno pepper. See how they like the spicy stuff. Then in can come a little bit more of our salvaged bedding material here. And let's not forget to place that cork right there, right in the center of the feeding area, so that next time we go looking for it, it can be sort of waiting for us in a somewhat predictable location. And here's some more jalapeno pepper. And you can see there's no seeds, because lately I've been on this kick trying to put all my seeds aside so that when I prepare my next batch of worm chow, I've got a whole bunch of material to use, which includes not only pepper seeds, but I've also been putting aside the seeds from cantaloupe melons. I've even got some old pumpkin seeds still laying around that have not been utilized yet. So here's some old banana stems and other stuff. But I think we've probably given this recycled batch of torn up newspaper bits a much better chance at being consumed now by the worms, as the supplemental bedding going in with today's feeding. And you know, I did put my my supply of pulverized eggshell here to be used as grit, so let's give them a little bit of that as well. And you know, I think the old feeding zone indicator is holding up well enough that we could simply use it one more time and hang on to those two that I just bought down from the kitchen. I'll set them aside for some other future use. So nothing left to do here other than backfill our feeding zone. And I thought about getting out my box of leaves to apply a nice top dressing of leafy matter out here. But you know what? Why don't we just leave it as is? Perhaps next time we'll do that, but I've been doing that in a lot of my systems, and for that matter, I'm not even sure if I've got enough leafy matter on hand to do that right now, because I think I've been so generous with the leafy matter lately that I might have actually depleted my supply of it. So if I'm not mistaken, I don't even have any with which we could have done it anyway. So that's it for our check-in now with the 233-day-old red wiggler bin, non-frozen feeding number 17 going in, 20 feedings overall. And that's it for the video. So hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.